Oh, hey. Huh, what's that? Oh, yeah, I'm carrying, bro. How could you tell? I'm not printing at all. All right, so today I wanted to go over one of my more recent builds that I've been shooting. This is my budget Mark 18. I say Mark 18 because, of course, this isn't even close to a real Mark 18. It's just kind of the idea of a short, like 10.5-inch 5.56 rifle. Now, I wanted to do a shorter setup like this because I tried to tell my ex-girlfriend that a small package can still pack some performance, and she didn't believe me. The other reason I built this rifle is because I love being bullied on the internet. It actually turns me... The other reason I built this was to just kind of throw together some cheaper parts and just kind of shoot them a bunch and see how long it could last if I have any issues with that. And so far it's actually been doing perfect. I haven't had any issues at all with this thing. So I just kind of want to go over the build, talk about the parts that I have on here, and also talk about why I wanted a 10.5-inch like this. But I mean, realistically, when you think about it, like 10.5 inches is huge. That's massive. So like, this is a pretty big setup. So to start off first, so that you guys have the most time to shit talk me in the comments, we're gonna talk about the optic on this thing, which is a Holosun red dot. A while ago, I made a video about my 13.7, and in that video, I had this red dot on it, and I got so many comments on that video shit talking me for running a Holosun on my rifle. Now, to be fair, I kind of talked about that rifle in that video as like a duty setup, and putting a Holosun red dot on a duty rifle is definitely not a good idea. Now in this case, I would definitely call this like a duty inspired setup. However, like if it was an actual law enforcement officer or something like that, I wouldn't run this actual setup. This is more like the easiest and cheapest way I could get like an SBR setup to take out to the range and shoot. When the most amount of combat that I see is a random FUD asking me when I'm gonna be done shooting so he can pick up my brass, I'd say this setup works just fine. In my experience with this Holosun red dot, when all that I really am using it for is just to go out and train on the flat range with some cardboard silhouettes, it works fantastic. I've never had an issue with it. I've never had an issue with a battery dying or it not holding zero or anything like that. Of course, if you were actually using this in a real duty scenario, it probably wouldn't last. But for what I'm using it for, I think it works great for around $200. It's a pretty good red dot. Now on the top rail here, I have a set of Magpul M-Bus sights. These are just the polymer flip-up sights. Moving up to the front of the rail here, I have a Streamlight ProTac rifle light. This is a great little light with the mount just built right onto the light there. It comes with a pressure pad that you can throw on top with these nice little rubber mounts that it comes with for a Picatinny rail. I've never had any issues with those coming loose or letting go of the pressure pad or anything like that. They work great. I know some of you guys want to talk shit on Streamlight. That's fine. I don't really care. I like it. In my experience, this light's been on a few different guns, had a lot of rounds on it, and it's never had any issues. Still works just fine. And of course, with the whole idea of this being a budget build, this is just a good fit for that. All right, moving on to the handguard. Kind of in the theme of putting cheaper parts on this gun to see how they perform. This is like an $80 Chinese-made quad rail from a local gun shop. My friend bought it years ago. I ended up getting it in a trade or something like that, so I didn't actually pay for it. This has been chopped down to be the right length for this build. It used to be probably, you know, it was for a 16-inch gun. Now, I kind of expected this to have issues with staying in place because the way that it clamps onto the barrel nut is not the best that I've seen. And I don't think it's actually made out of aluminum. I think it's like a Chinesium material, so I'm not super confident that these set screws are really gonna hold. I think those threads are super weak. But so far, this has been on a few different guns, and I haven't had any issues with things coming loose on it. But at the same time, I'm not like banging this gun around and crawling around in the dirt with it or anything like that that would really push on the handguard. I would definitely never recommend buying a shitty cheap handguard like this to put on a serious build, but this was just kind of a, hey, like I've got a bunch of random cheap parts lying around. I just want to build a gun and see what it does. So far, I've actually been very surprised and impressed with this thing. Moving up to the muzzle device, this is just a flash hider. I believe it's an OSS brand flash hider. I got this in just like a random pile of parts I got from a relative, and I just kind of had it laying around when I built this gun. I was like, I'll throw it on. It doesn't really add or take away anything on the gun. It's just a flash hider. Any other normal flash hider would do the same thing. The barrel on here is a McGowan Precision 10.5-inch 223 Wild. Now, I'll be honest, I had to Google McGowan Precision. I'd never heard of them before, but actually it seems like they make very high quality barrels. Their barrels are pretty expensive. Smaller company, but this is another part that I didn't pay for. I kind of got it out of the same pile of parts as the flash hider. You know, I checked like the headspace and stuff like that before I actually used it just to make sure that it was good. And so far it's been fantastic, and it's kind of fitting for a budget build to have a handful of parts on here that I didn't actually pay for. Of course, down here I'm just running a Magpul vertical foregrip that's been chopped down short, because I don't really need a full-length foregrip when I hold the gun the way I do. It's just kind of my bottom 2 fingers that sit on that. Moving into the receiver, this is an Aero Precision receiver set, upper and lower. Going into the Aero lower, I've had really good experience with these. Lowers are pretty easy to get right. There's not a lot of stress on any of the components in here, as long as they're machined in spec and hold, you know, the trigger group and the mag release in the places that they need to be. They work just fine, so it's pretty easy to get a cheap lower that just works. Now the Aero upper, I haven't had enough rounds on an Aero upper in one build like this to really say that they're great. They're good, and depending on the kind of gun you're building, I think that they work great in most cases. If you're building a gun like this where you're gonna be running, you know, thousands of rounds a year through it, I can't tell you how it's gonna wear in, if it's gonna last, if you're gonna start having, you know, reliability issues with the way the bolt and the upper are wearing together. But if you're building like a varmint rifle that's going to be shot 200 times a year, you probably won't ever have any issues with it. On this build, with my experience, I haven't had any issues with this upper. It's been running fine. The controls in here are all just mil-spec stuff. We got a mil-spec trigger group, a mil-spec safety selector, all that good stuff. The bolt that I have in this guy is actually a Bear Creek Arsenal. Of course, I did check the headspace with this bolt head and this barrel just to make sure that it was in spec and not going to have any issues. So far, haven't had any problems with it. It's been running great, but this is another part. It came out of another one of my guns, and I don't have enough rounds on it to be able to tell you, yes, these bolt carriers are great and they're gonna last forever. I really don't know yet. Other than that, I've just got a basic mag pull grip, an SB tactical brace on this thing, and then just a good old 2-point sling. And so far, this thing has been an absolute blast to shoot. I've been loving it. Okay, so now that I've broken down the build, I kind of want to talk about the theme around building this gun and address something that I think is a little bit skewed on the internet. Now, the whole idea I had around building this gun was I wanted to throw together a setup for as cheap as I could with parts I already had, and the parts that I had to go out and buy, I wanted to buy not bottom of the barrel, but budget parts for sure, and then just run this and see how it does. Because I really do think that if you spend much time in firearm spaces on the internet, you run into tons of people saying, if you're not buying top of the line stuff, if you're not buying the most expensive rifles, the most expensive optics, it's not even worth buying, it's just garbage, don't even use it. And I just think that that's complete bullshit. And I think that that discourages a lot of people from getting into building their own setups and actually getting out and shooting a lot, which I think is really important. So kind of what I wanted to prove with this build was that you could throw together a setup for way cheaper than a lot of people say that you should. Maybe not way cheaper, but cheaper than a lot of people say you should. And you can still get out on the range, run some drills, run a bunch of rounds through this, and just get some time on a gun to start building your skill with it. I think there's this whole idea around setups like this where you're talking about combat styled rifles, where they're like, if it's not combat ready, if it couldn't withstand a torture test or withstand being used in Afghanistan or something like that, it's not even worth building, it's not even worth shooting. And I just think that that's bullshit. I'm not even gonna try to pretend that this gun is combat ready. I would never even think about building something like this and giving it to a police officer or a SWAT member that's actually gonna be out there beating the crap out of it and using it in that way. But that's not why I built this gun. The whole reason I built this gun is just to go out on the range, run drills so that I can be a better shooter. And then if I ever feel like I'm in a position where I need a combat-ready gun, then I can address that later, but at least then I have the skill to use that combat-ready gun. I think that a lot of new shooters out there, because of all the research they do on the internet, they get this idea that, hey, I'm gonna be getting my first gun or my first real serious setup that I'm gonna go out and shoot. All these people are saying that I need to get a several $1,000 setup so that I can be the best that I can be. And really, at the end of the day, when it comes down to shooting, skill doesn't come from an expensive gun. Skill just comes from going out and shooting. And shooting a gun like this that doesn't cost a whole lot to build, and as long as it cycles rounds reliably and does everything it needs to do, you can build skill that way without spending unnecessary amounts of money. Now, I want it to be clear that I'm not saying that you can get one of these instead of a Daniel Defense Mark 18. No, Daniel Defense Mark 18s are super expensive for a reason. They're much better built. You have a Daniel Defense bolt carrier in a Daniel Defense receiver. They're gassed perfectly. They're just gonna run better and last longer and run dirtier than something like this. But of course, at that point, that's like comparing a giant lifted Jeep on 37-inch tires to a stock minivan. One is built to do very difficult, high stress, hard things. The other one is just there to do the basic job. A Daniel Defense Mark 18 is built to be a combat-ready firearm that you can put through hell and beat the absolute shit out of it, and it's still just gonna work. This is just built to get you out on the range and get you shooting so that you can build your skill on a firearm. Now, of course, if you're the kind of person where you have enough play money that you can justify just going out and getting a $2,000 gun for your first serious setup, there's not a single thing wrong with that. But that's not most people. Most people don't have that much money to spend. And I feel like people on the internet really avoid that. And they don't want to talk about, when they talk about budget guns and they're talking about a $1,000 handgun, that's not a budget gun. Your average citizen can't just buy a $1,000 handgun. For me personally, I don't have the kind of money where I could go out and buy an $800 Aimpoint T2 or a $400 Daniel Defense or Geisley rail for this gun. I just bought what I had the money for and I wanted to test it. And after shooting this for a while, they've been holding up just fine for what I've been using them for. So I just kind of wanted to make this video to address that and show that you can build something for cheaper, and as long as you or your buddy or whoever knows what they're doing, it can still be a reliable gun that runs and does what you need it to. And that there is a difference between the average person that just wants to get a good enough setup where they can just get out and shoot and have fun and train, and then the top dollar stuff that is actually combat ready and the best out there. So I'm sure you guys are all gonna have your own thoughts on this topic. I didn't make this video to try to start a fight or anything like that. I just wanted to put my side of things out there, but feel free to go down in the comments. Let me know what you think about it. Let me know if you think I'm just completely stupid. Call me poor if you want. I mean, I kind of am poor. That's the whole reason I have this. But you see, poor people also have a Second Amendment right, and they should be able to go out and find a way to exercise that right without being berated by the Gucci boys on the internet who think you should only shoot the best of the best stuff because money makes you a better shooter. But anyway, guys, that's about all I've got to talk about today. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that I have inspired some of you guys to do what you can to get out there and train and just get out on the range and have some fun. If you guys did enjoy this video, I would really appreciate it if you could go down and leave a like on it. If you think that I'm just some simple-minded fool spreading misinformation, go down, tell me why. Leave a dislike on the video. I really don't care. And go out of your way to tell someone that they look nice today.